Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. I guess I should start by giving you a bit of background on me and my wife, Jessica. We've been married for 6 years, together for 8. I'm 32, and she's 30. She works as a flight attendant for a major airline, which always sounded glamorous, but it also meant a lot of time apart. I work as a graphic designer, so I've got a 9 to 5 routine while she's jetting off to different cities. Our marriage hasn't been perfect, but I thought we were solid. Sure, we had our occasional arguments about her being gone so much, and she'd tease me for being too routine-oriented. I figured those were just normal things every couple dealt with. She always reassured me, saying, "You knew what you signed up for when you married a flight attendant." I would laugh it off, telling myself that trust was the cornerstone of our relationship. But about a month ago, I started noticing little things. Nothing huge, just off. Jessica suddenly became more protective of her phone. She used to leave it lying around, but now it's glued to her side. She'd smile at her screen sometimes and type furiously, then quickly lock it when I walked into the room. When I jokingly asked her, "Who are you texting so much?" she rolled her eyes and said, "It's just work stuff." You wouldn't get it. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure, paranoid husband, so I let it slide. After all, I trusted her, but something about her tone stuck with me. It wasn't just dismissive. It felt rehearsed, like she was deflecting. And then there was the lingerie. Jessica went out and bought some really fancy sets, lace and silk, the works. When I complimented her and asked if she wanted to have a special night, she laughed and said, "Oh, this is just for me." It makes me feel confident at work. I didn't press her on it, but in hindsight, that should have been a red flag. At the time, though, I chalked it up to her needing to feel good about herself. I mean, who doesn't like new clothes, right? Little did I know, this was just the beginning of everything unraveling. A week after the lingerie thing, Jessica's schedule changed. She started picking up extra flights, which she'd never done before. She always used to say she hated being away too long, but now she was volunteering for back-to-back trips. When I asked her about it, she shrugged and said, "We need the extra money, don't we?" Okay, fair. We weren't struggling, but a little extra cash never hurt anyone. Still, something about her sudden enthusiasm for work didn't sit right with me. Then came the mood swings. One minute she'd be super sweet, bringing me coffee or cuddling up on the couch like old times. The next, she'd snap over the smallest things. I forgot to unload the dishwasher one morning, and she went on a mini tirade about how I never pull my weight around here. I was stunned because that's never been an issue before. I reminded her that I've been doing the laundry, cooking dinner, and basically holding down the fort while she's gone. She just rolled her eyes and muttered something about not wanting to argue. At this point, I started to wonder if maybe I was imagining things. Work stress? Hormones? I didn't know. I even blamed myself for being too sensitive. But then something happened that made it impossible to ignore. Jessica was on a 4-day trip to Dallas. Normally, she'd call or FaceTime me during layovers, even if it was just for a quick chat. But this time, radio silence. I texted her a few times, and her replies were short and vague. "Busy. We'll call later." She never did. When she finally got back, I asked her how the trip was, and she gave me this half-hearted smile and said, same old, same old." But here's the kicker. She reeked of men's cologne when she walked in the door. Not her usual flowery perfume, but something unmistakably masculine. I asked her about it, and she laughed like I was crazy. "It must have been one of the pilots," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "We're all crammed into those tiny crew areas, you know? Their cologne just lingers." Her explanation didn't sit well with me. I mean, how does someone else's cologne end up all over your hair and clothes? But again, I didn't push. I told myself I was overthinking it. That night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't even think of touching it, but this time, something compelled me. It was a text from someone named Brian. It read, "Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was amazing. Let me know when you're free again." My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. My mind raced with possibilities, but there was no way to spin that text into something innocent. I read it over and over again, hoping I was misinterpreting it. But there it was. Last night was amazing. I didn't even know who this Brian guy was, but the text made it clear he knew Jessica more intimately than he should. My chest tightened as a mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak washed over me. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but she was still in the shower, humming away like she didn't have a care in the world. Part of me thought about putting the phone back down and pretending I hadn't seen it. Maybe I could just let it slide, give her the benefit of the doubt. But then I realized that was insane. I deserved the truth. I've been a good husband. I didn't deserve this. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, she gave me a casual smile. "What's with the look?" she asked, drying her hair like nothing was wrong. I held up her phone. "Who's Brian?" My voice was calm, but I could feel the anger bubbling underneath. Her face dropped for a split second before she recovered. "What are you doing with my phone?" "That's private," she snapped, snatching it from my hand. "Don't deflect, Jessica. Answer the question." "Who is Brian?" She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "He's just a coworker. We're friends." "God, you're being ridiculous." I stood my ground. Friends don't text each other things like, "Last night was amazing." Her face flushed, and for a moment I thought she might come clean. But instead, she doubled down. "You're misinterpreting it. He meant the crew dinner. We all went out after the flight. It's not what you think." I felt like I was being gaslit in real time. "You're telling me a coworker texts you that because of a dinner? Do you think I'm an idiot?" Her tone shifted from defensive to outright nasty. "You know what? Maybe you are an idiot. You're always so insecure about me traveling, and now you're looking for reasons to be jealous. Grow up, Alex." Her words stung, but they didn't distract me from the fact that she was lying through her teeth. "I'm not the one lying here, Jessica. If there's nothing going on, show me the messages." She clutched her phone to her chest like it was a lifeline. "I'm not going to let you invade my privacy. This is controlling, and it's why I've been so stressed lately. You're suffocating me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Somehow, she was trying to flip this around on me like I was the problem. My hands were shaking, and I felt the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. "I'll ask you one last time," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Are you having an affair?" She stared at me, her jaw clenched. Then, in the coldest voice I'd ever heard her use, she said, "You're being pathetic, Alex. Believe whatever you want." And with that, she stormed out of the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. After Jessica stormed out of the bedroom, I just sat there, stunned. Her refusal to give me a straight answer felt like confirmation, even if she hadn't outright admitted anything. My mind was a whirlwind. Memories of our wedding, our life together, all the little moments where I thought we were happy. It all suddenly felt like a lie, but I wasn't ready to let it go without proof. If she wasn't going to be honest with me, I'd find the truth myself. I waited until the next morning when she left for a yoga class to check her phone. I know, snooping is wrong, and I feel awful about it even now. But at this point, I needed answers more than I needed to respect her so-called privacy. She had changed her phone password. That was another blow. She'd never done that before, and it was like a neon sign flashing. Guilty. Still, I wasn't about to give up. I remembered that her iPad was synced to her iCloud account, so I grabbed it from the living room and opened it up. No password on the iPad. Rookie mistake, Jess. I opened her messages, and there it was. Brian. The texts weren't just flirty. They were explicit. I won't go into all the details because, honestly, it makes me sick to even think about them, but let's just say there was no way she could explain it as crew dinner. He called her baby and talked about sneaking off during layovers. There were even photos, one she'd sent him. Pictures of herself in that new lingerie she bought captioned, "Can't wait to see you again." I wanted to throw the iPad across the room, but I needed to keep my cool. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to myself. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them yet, but I knew I needed to document this. If she was going to keep lying, I wanted undeniable proof. And then I found something even worse. There was a message thread where they talked about a specific night, the same night she claimed to be in Dallas. She wasn't in Dallas. She was in Chicago, in Brian's hotel room. My blood ran cold as I read through the messages detailing how they'd planned it, how she'd lied to me about her location, and how they'd spent the night together. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen, trying to process what I'd just learned. The person I thought I knew, the woman I married, had been lying to me for God knows how long. When Jessica came home from yoga, she was in an annoyingly chipper mood, acting like our argument the night before never happened. She kissed me on the cheek and asked, "What do you want for breakfast?" I couldn't even look at her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice icy. Her smile faltered. "About what?" I stared her down and said, "About Chicago. And Brian." Her face went pale. The color drained from Jessica's face the moment I said Chicago and Brian. Her eyes widened, and she stammered, "Well, what are you talking about?" I stood up, holding the iPad in my hand. "Don't play dumb, Jessica. I know everything. I saw the messages. I know you weren't in Dallas that night. You were with him. In Chicago." Her hands flew to her mouth, and for a second, I thought she was going to start crying. But instead, she squared her shoulders and tried to act defiant. "You went through my stuff? Are you serious, Alex? That's such a violation of my privacy." I laughed bitterly. "A violation of your privacy? Are you kidding me right now? You lied to my face, cheated on me, and you're worried about your privacy? How about my trust? My dignity? Do those matter to you at all?" She crossed her arms and shot back. "You were snooping through my phone and my iPad. That's controlling and toxic. I can't believe you don't trust me." Her words were like a slap in the face. She was still trying to gaslight me, even after being caught red-handed. "Jessica, stop trying to flip this around. I have the screenshots. I read the texts. I saw the photos. So don't stand here and try to make me feel like I'm the bad guy." Her face twisted into a mix of anger and panic. "Fine," she snapped. "You want the truth? Yes, I slept with him. Are you happy now? Is that what you wanted to hear?" The room felt like it was spinning. Hearing her admit it, even though I already knew, hit me like a freight train. "Why, Jess? Why would you do this? What did I do to deserve this?" She rolled her eyes, her tone venomous. "Oh, don't act like you're some perfect husband, Alex. You're boring. All you do is sit at your computer, working or playing video games. You never do anything exciting. Brian makes me feel alive, okay? He actually appreciates me." Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. I felt like I'd been stabbed in the chest. "You think I'm boring? I've spent the last 6 years trying to build a life with you, supporting you, trusting you. And this is how you repay me." She didn't respond, just stood there glaring at me like I was the one who had ruined everything. I took a deep breath, trying to keep myself from completely losing it. "So, what now? Are you planning to leave me for him? Or was I just a placeholder while you figured out what you wanted?" She hesitated, her expression softening for a moment. I don't know. I didn't plan for this to happen, Alex. It just happened." I shook my head. "That's a pathetic excuse, Jessica. Affairs don't just happen. You made a choice. Over and over again." She started crying then, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. The damage was done, and her tears felt more like regret at being caught than actual remorse. "I need some time to think," I said finally, my voice cold. "But I'll tell you one thing. I'm not going to be your backup plan while you figure out if Brian is worth it." Jessica stood there crying, but it wasn't the kind of crying that screamed remorse. It felt more like frustration. Frustration that her perfect little double life was falling apart. I couldn't even look at her anymore. Every time I did, I saw the texts, the pictures, and the smug satisfaction she must have felt thinking she was getting away with it. "I need some space," I told her, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. "Don't follow me." "Alex, wait," she called after me, but I didn't stop. I needed to breathe, to think, to process everything that had just happened. My mind was a hurricane of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion, and this gnawing feeling of inadequacy. I'd given this woman everything. and somehow, it still wasn't enough for her. I drove aimlessly for a while before parking at a quiet spot by the lake. That's when it all hit me. I broke down in my car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. I wasn't just angry, I was heartbroken. I kept replaying her words in my head. "You're boring. Brian makes me feel alive." It felt like every single effort I'd made to be a good husband was being thrown back in my face. After a while, I called my best friend, Matt. He's the kind of guy who always has my back, and I knew I needed someone to talk to who wouldn't sugarcoat things. When I told him what happened, he went silent for a moment before saying, "Dude, I don't even know what to say. That's messed up on so many levels." "No kidding," I replied, my voice cracking. "What the hell do I even do now?" "First of all, don't go back there tonight," Matt said firmly. "Come crash at my place. You need space, and she needs to realize how badly she screwed up." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, you're right." When I got to Matt's place, he handed me a beer and let me vent for hours. It felt good to let it out, but no amount of talking could erase what had happened. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. Later that night, Jessica texted me, "I'm sorry. Can we please talk? I don't want to lose you." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to reply, to tell her how much she'd hurt me. But the other part, the smarter part, knew that nothing I said would change what she'd done. So I didn't respond. The next day, Matt convinced me to talk to a lawyer. "Just to know your options," he said. I didn't want to think about divorce yet, but I knew he was right. I couldn't afford to let my emotions cloud my judgment. If this marriage was over, I needed to protect myself. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed at Matt's place. I was physically exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I hadn't slept a wink. Jessica had sent a few more texts overnight, all variations of "I'm sorry" and "Can we please talk?" I still couldn't bring myself to reply. Matt made coffee and handed me a cup. "You look like hell," he said, giving me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. "You should call that lawyer I mentioned. Just see what your options are." I hesitated. It feels so final, like once I talk to a lawyer, there's no going back. Matt shrugged. "She slept with another guy, Alex. She went behind your back for who knows how long. You owe it to yourself to at least know what your next steps look like." He was right. As much as I didn't want to face it, this wasn't something that could just be swept under the rug. So I called the lawyer Matt recommended, a no-nonsense guy named Greg who specialized in family law. He agreed to meet me that afternoon. Sitting in Greg's office felt surreal. He was professional but direct, asking me to lay out the situation. When I told him about Jessica's affair, he nodded knowingly. "Unfortunately, this isn't uncommon," he said. "But the good news is, if you decide to pursue divorce, her infidelity could work in your favor, especially if you have proof." I showed him the screenshots I'd taken. He skimmed through them, then gave me a grim smile. "This is solid evidence. If we need to, we can use this to negotiate favorable terms for you, especially regarding finances or property." Hearing him talk so matter-of-factly about my marriage as if it were a business transaction made my stomach churn. But I also felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I had some control over the situation. "Do I have to make a decision right away?" I asked. Greg shook his head. "No, but the sooner you act, the better. If she starts trying to manipulate the narrative or hide assets, it could complicate things. My advice? Go home, think it over, and decide what's best for you. But don't wait too long." I left the office feeling a mix of empowerment and devastation. I still wasn't sure if I was ready to end the marriage, but at least I knew where I stood legally. And honestly, knowing that I had options made me feel a little less trapped. When I got back to Matt's, he asked how it went. "Informative," I said, but it made everything feel so real. "Good," he replied, "because it is real. You're going to have to face this, Alex, one way or another." That night, Jessica called me. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. "Alex, I know you're hurt, and you have every right to be. But please, can we just talk? I don't want to lose you." For the first time since finding out about her affair, I felt a twinge of doubt. Maybe she really was sorry. Maybe we could fix this. But then I thought about Brian, the texts, the lies, and the way she tried to blame me for it all. That doubt didn't last long. The next morning, I decided it was time to confront Jessica face to face one last time. I needed closure, whether it meant moving forward together, somehow, or walking away for good. I texted her, "I'll come by later to talk. Don't try to spin this or lie. I need honesty." She replied almost instantly, "Thank you. I'll be here." When I arrived at the house, my stomach was in knots. It didn't feel like home anymore. The place I'd spent so many happy moments now felt tainted. Jessica was sitting on the couch, her eyes puffy and red like she'd been crying nonstop. She looked up when I walked in and started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said. "Let me talk first." She nodded, her lips trembling. I sat down across from her, keeping my distance. "Jessica, I don't want excuses, and I don't want you to turn this around on me like you did before. I want the truth. How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, looking down at her hands. "A few months," she admitted quietly. "It started when we were on a layover in Miami. We were all drinking, and things just escalated. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. A few months," I repeated, shaking my head. "So every time you came home, kissed me, acted like everything was normal, you were lying to me." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know I hurt you, Alex. I hate myself for it. I never meant for it to go this far." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. "Why, Jessica? Why? Was it just about sex, or was there something else?" Her face crumpled. "I don't know," she said, her voice breaking. "It wasn't just about sex, but it wasn't like I fell in love with him either. He made me feel wanted, excited, like I was more than just a wife or a flight attendant." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "So, I didn't make you feel wanted? Is that what you're saying?" She looked at me desperately. "It's not your fault. I swear, Alex, this was my mistake. You're a great husband. I was just selfish. I was looking for something I didn't even know I wanted." I stood up, pacing the room. "Do you even realize what you've done? You destroyed the trust we built. You humiliated me. Do you think I'll ever look at you the same way again?" Jessica sobbed harder. "I'll do anything to fix this, Alex. I'll quit my job, go to therapy, whatever it takes. Please don't give up on us." I stopped pacing and looked at her, my heart heavy with a mixture of anger and sadness. "Do you even know how hard it is for me to look at you right now? Every time I see your face, I see him. I see the lies. I don't know if I can come back from this." She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I wanted to comfort her. I really did, but I couldn't. Her pain didn't erase mine. "I need time," I said finally. "Don't contact me unless it's absolutely necessary. I'll let you know when I've made a decision." Her head shot up, panic in her eyes. "Alex, please." I cut her off. "I can't do this right now, Jess. I just can't." And with that, I walked out, leaving her sobbing on the couch. I didn't look back. Walking out of that house felt like tearing off a bandage, but the wound underneath was still raw and bleeding. As I drove back to Matt's place, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Relief because I'd said what I needed to say, but emptiness because I realized how much of my life revolved around Jessica. Even now, after everything, part of me missed her, missed the version of her I thought I knew. When I got back to Matt's, he was waiting with a six-pack and a look that said, "How'd it go?" I didn't say anything at first, just cracked open a beer and took a long drink. She admitted to everything. I finally said. Tried to say it was a mistake, that she felt neglected, blah, blah, blah. Same old excuses. Matt shook his head. "Mom, I'm sorry. That's brutal." I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, and now she's begging me to stay. Wants to quit her job, go to therapy, the whole 9 yards. But honestly, I don't know if it even matters anymore." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound being the faint hum of traffic outside. Finally, Matt spoke up. "Do you think you could ever forgive her? Like, really forgive her?" I stared at the wall, mulling it over. I don't know. I want to say no, but then I think about everything we've been through. 8 years together, 6 of them married. It's not easy to just throw all of that away. Matt nodded. Yeah, but you also can't just sweep this under the rug. If you do, it'll eat you alive. I know, I said, running a hand through my hair. I feel like no matter what I do, I lose. If I leave her, I lose the life we built. If I stay, I lose my self-respect. Or maybe you rebuild your self-respect by making her earn it back, Matt suggested. But only if that's what you really want. If you're done, then you're done, and that's okay too. His words stuck with me. That night, as I lay on the couch in his living room, I thought about what I really wanted. Did I want to fight for our marriage, knowing it would never be the same? Or did I want to start over, even if it meant being alone? I replayed every argument, every excuse, every tear-filled plea Jessica had made. I thought about the trust she'd shattered and whether it could ever be repaired. By the time the sun came up, I still didn't have an answer. But I did know one thing. I couldn't stay in limbo forever. A decision had to be made, and soon. After a few days of silence, I decided I couldn't drag this out any longer. I needed to see where Jessica and I stood. Not just for her, but for myself. I texted her, "We need to talk. I'll come by tonight." She replied almost instantly, "Okay, thank you." When I arrived at the house that evening, Jessica looked like a mess. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were swollen, and she was wearing one of my old hoodies, the one she always stole when she was upset. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered why we were here. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same place where we'd had countless dinners, shared laughs, and planned our future. Now it felt like a war room. I've thought a lot about this. I started, my voice calm but firm. And I need to know, are you really serious about trying to fix this? Or are you just scared of being alone? Her face crumpled, and she immediately started crying. "Alex, I swear I want to fix this. I love you. I've made the biggest mistake of my life, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." I held up a hand to stop her. "Words aren't enough, Jessica. If I even consider giving this another shot, I need to see real actions. No more excuses, no more lies." She nodded frantically. "Of course. I'll quit my job. I'll block Brian. I'll go to therapy. Whatever you need." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "You say that now, but are you actually willing to follow through? Because if I catch you lying again, even once, it's over. No second chances." She reached across the table to grab my hand, her grip desperate. "I promise, Alex. I'll prove it to you." I pulled my hand away gently, but firmly. "Don't promise me. Prove it." For the next hour, we hashed out what it would take to even begin rebuilding the trust she destroyed. She agreed to quit her job and find something local. She agreed to give me full access to her phone and email. No secrets, no boundaries. She even offered to go to couples therapy and individual counseling to figure out why she'd made the choices she did. But even as we talked, I felt a gnawing doubt in the pit of my stomach. Could I really forgive her? Could I ever look at her the same way? And more importantly, did I even want to? By the time I left, we had a tentative plan in place. Jessica would start therapy that week, and we'd attend our first couple session together the following Monday. I told her I'd stay at Matt's for the time being, but I'd come by periodically to check in. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a mistake. Was I giving her a chance because I truly believed in our marriage? Or was it because I was scared to start over? For now, all I could do was wait and see if her actions matched her words. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of a long, painful road, one that might not even lead to the destination I hoped for. The following week was a strange limbo. Jessica seemed desperate to prove she was serious about making things right. She emailed her resignation letter to her airline and even let me read it before she sent it. She made an appointment with a therapist, forwarding me the confirmation email as proof. She blocked Brian on every platform and handed me her phone, saying, "Check if you want." I've got nothing to hide. It all felt like a performance, like she was putting on a show to convince me she was remorseful. And maybe she was, but even with all her efforts, I couldn't shake the image of her with Brian, the texts, the lies. Every time she said, "I love you," it sounded hollow. Our first couples therapy session was a train wreck. The therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Nolan, asked us to start by sharing how we were feeling. Jessica went first. "I feel horrible," she said, her voice trembling. "I betrayed Alex, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I just want to do whatever I can to rebuild our marriage." When it was my turn, I was brutally honest. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. And I don't trust her. I don't even know if I want to be here, but I'm trying because I don't want to look back and think I didn't give it a chance." Dr. Nolan nodded, her expression calm. "Those are valid feelings, Alex. Rebuilding trust after infidelity is one of the hardest things a couple can face. But it's possible if both of you are committed." The session went on, with Jessica explaining how she'd felt disconnected in our marriage, like we'd become more like roommates than partners. She admitted she sought attention from Brian because she didn't know how to address those feelings with me. "That doesn't excuse what I did," she said tearfully. "I was wrong, but I want to learn how to communicate better so this never happens again." I sat there, my arms crossed, feeling both angry and exhausted. "I get that, but how am I supposed to believe you won't just do this again? You didn't just hurt me. You shattered everything I thought we had." Dr. Nolan jumped in. "Jessica, rebuilding trust will require not just words, but consistent actions over time. And Alex, it's okay to take things one day at a time. Healing isn't linear." After the session, Jessica asked if I wanted to grab dinner. I said no, opting to head back to Matt's instead. I wasn't ready to pretend things were normal. That night, I sat alone in Matt's living room, staring at my phone. Jessica had texted me, "Thank you for coming today. I know this is hard, but I'll keep fighting for us if you will." I didn't respond. I knew I was at a crossroads. I could try to rebuild this broken marriage, or I could walk away and start fresh. Neither option felt good. Both felt like losing in different ways. The days after our first therapy session felt like walking on a tightrope. Jessica texted me regularly, sending updates about her therapy sessions, asking how I was doing, and repeating how much she wanted to fix things. I responded with short, polite answers, but I kept my distance. I didn't want to give her false hope, especially when I still didn't know how I felt. At Matt's place, I started reflecting on our marriage in a way I never had before. Had I really been as boring and predictable as she claimed? Was I partially to blame for her feeling disconnected? The logical part of me knew that nothing justified her actions, but the emotional part couldn't help but wonder if I'd failed her somehow. One night, Matt and I sat on the balcony with a couple of beers. "So, what's the plan?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "You gonna give her another chance?" "I don't know," I admitted, staring out at the city lights. "She's doing all the right things, quitting her job, going to therapy, but it still feels hollow. Like, no matter what she does, I'll never trust her again." Matt nodded. "That's the thing about trust, man. Once it's gone, it's damn near impossible to get back. Even if she's 100% sincere, it might not be enough for you. And that's okay." His words echoed in my head for the next few days. Was I holding on to the idea of saving our marriage because I truly believed it could be salvaged, or because I was afraid to let go of the life we'd built? The following week, Jessica and I had our second therapy session. This time, Dr. Nolan focused on practical steps for rebuilding trust. Jessica was eager to participate, promising transparency and asking what I needed from her to feel secure again. "I don't even know," I said honestly. "How do you rebuild trust when the foundation is gone? I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, even if you're doing everything right." Dr. Nolan nodded. "That's a normal reaction, Alex. It's going to take time, and it's okay to set boundaries while you figure out what you need. Jessica, it's important that you respect those boundaries and understand that rebuilding trust is a long process." After the session, Jessica tried to talk to me in the parking lot. I know I can't fix this overnight, she said, her eyes pleading. But I love you, Alex. I'm not giving up on us. I sighed, feeling torn. I'm not making any promises, Jessica. I need more time. She nodded, tears welling up. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. As I drove back to Matt's, I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Every step forward felt like it came with 10 steps of uncertainty. Was I giving her a real chance, or just delaying the inevitable? The following weeks were a roller coaster. Jessica continued to do everything she said she would. She sent me screenshots showing she'd blocked Brian on all platforms. She texted updates from therapy, and she even started sending me pictures of her daily activities to prove she wasn't hiding anything. But despite her efforts, I couldn't shake the gnawing doubt. Every time she texted, every time we sat in therapy, I kept replaying the betrayal in my mind. It wasn't just the affair. It was the lies, the excuses, the way she tried to turn it all on me at first. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't unsee those texts or unhear her venomous words during our first confrontation. Matt noticed I was spiraling. One night, after I spent an hour ranting about Jessica and how conflicted I felt, he said, "Look, man, I know you're trying to figure this out, but can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, taking a sip of beer. "Do you actually want to fix this marriage? Or are you just afraid of what happens if you don't?" His question hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't answer right away because, honestly, I didn't know. Part of me wanted to fix things because I didn't want to give up on the life we'd built. But another part of me, the louder part, was terrified that I'd never be able to truly forgive her. That even if we stayed together, the cracks would always be there, waiting to break us apart again. A few days later, Jessica and I had our third therapy session. Dr. Nolan asked us to share one thing we were afraid to admit to each other. Jessica went first. "I'm afraid that no matter what I do, you'll never forgive me," she said, her voice trembling. "And I don't blame you for that, but it terrifies me. I don't want to lose you, Alex." Her vulnerability was genuine, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But when it was my turn, I didn't hold back. "I'm afraid I'll never trust you again," I said bluntly. "I'm afraid I'll always be wondering where you are, who you're with, what you're doing. And I don't know if I can live like that." Jessica's face crumpled, and she started crying. Dr. Nolan stepped in, reminding us that these fears were valid and part of the healing process. But in that moment, it didn't feel like healing. It felt like a dead end. After the session, Jessica texted me, "I know you're struggling, and I'll keep fighting for us no matter how hard it gets. I love you." I didn't reply. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling in Matt's guest room. Matt's question kept echoing in my head. "Do you actually want to fix this?" And for the first time, I started to accept that maybe the answer was no. A week after our third therapy session, I reached my breaking point. Jessica was still sending me regular updates, trying to show how committed she was to repairing the damage. But every text felt like a weight on my chest. The truth was, no matter what she did, I couldn't escape the constant replay of her betrayal in my mind. One evening, after another long day of avoiding her messages, Matt and I were sitting in his living room. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me a beer and let me stew in silence. Finally, I blurted out, "I don't think I can do this." Matt raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't think I can forgive her," I said, the words tumbling out like a confession. "I've been trying to keep an open mind, trying to see if there's a way forward, but I can't. It's like every part of me is screaming to walk away." Matt nodded slowly. "So, what's stopping you?" I shrugged, staring at the floor. "I don't know. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's fear. I mean, I loved her, Matt. I married her because I thought she was my forever. Walking away feels like I'm admitting I failed." "You didn't fail, man," Matt said firmly. "She did. And you're not walking away from love. You're walking away from someone who broke it. There's a difference." His words hit me like a lightning bolt. For the first time, I realized that staying wasn't about love anymore. It was about fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of starting over. Fear of being alone. That night, I made up my mind. It wasn't fair to either of us to keep dragging this out. Jessica deserved someone who truly wanted to rebuild, and I deserved the chance to heal, without the constant reminder of her betrayal hanging over me. The next morning, I texted her, "Can we meet tonight? I need to talk to you." She replied almost instantly, "Of course. I'll be home." When I walked into the house that evening, Jessica was waiting for me in the living room. She looked hopeful, like she thought I was coming back for good. But as soon as she saw my expression, her face fell. "I've been thinking a lot about us," I began, sitting down across from her. "About everything that's happened and what it would take to fix it." Jessica nodded, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Alex. I swear." "I know you are," I said softly, "and I believe you're sorry. But it's not enough." Her eyes filled with tears. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I can't do this," I said, my voice trembling. "I've tried to picture a future where we rebuild, where I can trust you again. But I can't. Every time I look at you, I see him. I see the lies, and it's killing me." Jessica started sobbing, shaking her head. "Alex, please, don't do this. I love you. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I felt tears welling up in my own eyes, but I forced myself to stay strong. "I know you love me, Jess, but love isn't enough. Not after this. I need to walk away, for both of us." She broke down completely, collapsing into the couch as she cried. It was one of the hardest moments of my life, but I knew it was the right decision. Staying would have been a slow death for both of us. "I'm sorry," I said, standing up. "I'll have the divorce papers drawn up. I'll make this as easy as I can." She didn't respond, just sobbed in her hands as I walked out the door for the last time. Walking out of that house for the last time was one of the most surreal moments of my life. It felt like I was leaving more than just a home. I was leaving an entire chapter of my life behind. The weight of it hit me as soon as I got in my car, but instead of breaking down, I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, numb. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was more like exhaustion, like I'd been carrying a boulder uphill for months and finally decided to let it roll back down. For the first few days, everything felt raw. Every little thing reminded me of Jessica. I'd hear a song we used to play on road trips, or I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text her before realizing there was no point. Even the smell of her shampoo lingered on my clothes from that last hug before I left, making it impossible to fully escape her presence. But as the days turned into weeks, the intensity of the pain started to dull. It was still there, but it wasn't as sharp. I guess that's the funny thing about heartbreak. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it fades in increments so small you barely notice it until one day you realize you're not crying in the shower anymore, or lying awake all night replaying the same conversations in your head. I threw myself into anything and everything that didn't remind me of her. Work became my sanctuary. I started taking on extra projects, pouring my energy into designs that felt like little pieces of me coming back to life.